Hey y'all, welcome back to Gadfly, the podcast about third parties, French candidates, and generally weird American electoral history. I'm Dusty Wilson.
I'm Una O'Leary.
Oh man, I have so much news for you, Una. This is a momentous time because not only, holy shit, do we have Rocky news, but we also have previous topic news.
Aside from Rocky?
Yeah. I'm going to start with the lesser of the two. Do you remember the Alaskan Independence Party?
How could I forget?
They're back.
What?
2020 seems to be the year that the party is coming back, because this year they are fielding candidates in 4 races. 2 House races in Alaska, 1 Senate race in Alaska, and a fellow by the name of John Wayne Howe is running for Senator of Alaska in the American Independence Party.
God bless.
Yeah, I mean,
Fight the good fight.
Joe Vogler might get his dream of one day finally being buried in a free Alaska.
When they exhume him,
yes.
Or at least like dig up his coffin
Yeah.
in the Canadian province of Yukon.
Yes.
And then move it back.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully it's permafrost, so his body's still probably in pretty good condition, but...
No, I doubt it. It's definitely not.
So that's thing one. But yeah, and the other is Rocky news. It's part Rocky news, but also part Constitution Party news. So previously this year, I referred to the Constitution Party as one of the big 3 third political parties. After this year, I am going to have to revoke that title. There is a bit of inter-party arguing going on right now.
Oh, Lord.
It's not great.
You mean to tell me that a third party is arguing with itself?
Look, a party full of people who don't like each other, apparently. So yeah, the Constitution Party's been having a bit of arguing amongst itself. And as of right now, out of the 570 electoral votes it could have, they only have ballot access on 156 of those. So you need 270 to win. Constitution Party's not even going to come close this year. But you know who has more electoral vote possibilities than that?
No, who?
Rocky De La Fuente.
Stop!
This last week, in fact, 2 days ago, Rocky attained ballot access in California, giving him a total of 196 electoral votes. Now, how he got that California ballot line, though, is a little hilarious. He ended up getting the last possible party nomination he could have from the American Independent Party. Now, the history of the American Independent Party is not that great. We kind of brought them up in the Alan Keyes episode, because that was the party that George Wallace founded, because he wanted the world to know that black people aren't as good as white people, in his opinion. And since they have somewhat changed, I would assume they're more of like a libertarian-ish sort of thing. And Rocky ended up getting their nomination this year. And they already have ballot access in California, and that's how he got it. But
this is a marriage of convenience.
100%. I mean, it would have been really embarrassing for Rocky, a San Diego businessman, to not be on the ballot in California. And really, only 20 people voted to put him on the ballot, because that's, I guess, all the ranking members who are left in the American Independent Party. But they didn't choose Darcy Richardson, who is his preferred vice presidential nominee. Instead, they picked a little-known musician by the name of Kanye West.
What? As what?
As Rocky De La Fuente's vice presidential nominee in California, it is Kanye West.
Does Kanye know?
I don't know if Kanye knows he's running for president. I don't know the legality of this whole thing, if you could just select anyone to be someone's vice president, but I don't know how this is going to go. But I guess they could literally put anyone on their ballot they want.
I mean, yeah, fuck it. Just like put them on the ballot, hope for the best, get that name recognition, and then acknowledge that you still don't have a chance in hell of actually winning the presidency.
But this might boost the American Independent Party's numbers by double. Who knows? It's the weirdest bit of news that I have read, and it made me so dorkily happy for Rocky. Because as of right now, he is on the ballot for the 5th most electoral votes out of everyone running for president.
Number 5. All right.
Rocky has a good chance of finishing 5th overall this year.
Oh my God.
And you know that means we're going to get so much more Rocky in the future.
That I cannot wait. I am truly, this is a gift that keeps giving. Rocky is truly the reason this podcast exists.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for Rocky De La Fuente, I'd be spending my Sundays doing, I don't know. I could get my phone despondently.
Yeah, and thanks to that, I get to play around in any number of third party intraside fascinations instead of watching DNC coverage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's as the Rocky campaign says in their campaign motto, together we are stronger.
It's, it's so late. Like, I'm disappointed by that. I'm just, you're Rocky De La Fuente. Like, go big, go weird.
Look, the campaign template just said that when we bought it, so it would have cost an extra $20 to change it.
It's like just Control A, highlight in blue, and then fix to Arial. Done. That's how I'm imagining it. Just no thought, complete disregard for any design aesthetic.
It would be an improvement. But
No.
together we are stronger. And on that note, oh man, this is one I was so excited to talk about. I figured this episode was going to be the one where we had the most fun and never got mad. But then I had to realize, no, there's always going to be so much that's going to make you mad about this. And I got everything you could want in this one, Una. I've got references to obscure architects. I've got philosophy mentions. And I've got people just fucking with authority.
Oh boy.
We're going to be talking about something that became known as the Battle of Aspen.
Oh, no.
Are you drawing a complete blank on this one?
Yes.
Good. Oh my god, I'm so excited.
I'm just imagining like very, very well-to-do people in their second homes.
Yep. That's a good place to start.
Oh no.
So with all of our previous episodes, we've begun with the birth of a person or a movement. But today, we're going to be switching it up a little bit, and we're going to be talking about the birth of a city, Aspen, Colorado. So Aspen was founded by a pack of rogue silver miners in 1879.
Let's just end there. I think that's all you need to know.
It's what it says on the city seal. It's designed by Michael Kors, it just says.
Stronger together.
So at the time, Governor Frederick Pitkin was in a bit of a worry that the actual owners of the land, the White River Band of the Utes, were gonna get really mad if people started taking more of their land. So he begged these people, please don't try to go to Aspen and make it your own. And as is tradition in white culture, they ignored him.
Like, if anything, that just makes them want to do it more.
Yeah. As westward expansion rose, the amount of previously signed treaties America had signed with the indigenous population were becoming more and more disregarded. The area around Aspen in particular had suddenly become so carnivorously wanted because it turns out there's a fuck ton of silver in the mountains there. So Governor Pitkin had requested that settlers not move any further for fear the Utes justifiably fighting to keep their homes. This was a bit of a double back on his campaign motto of, the Utes must go. But you know, a good politician adapts. The miners ignored the governor and founded a brand new town that would eventually be called Aspen, but initially they named the city Ute City.
What a fuck you.
Yeah.
Glad they changed it to Aspen.
Yeah, it took them a year, but they did.
Oh boy.
To try and stem any fighting, a fellow by the name of Nathan Meeker was appointed United States Indian Agent at the White River Ute Indian Reservation the year prior. The job was intended to be more of an ambassador position that would facilitate conversations between the indigenous peoples and the US government. Nathan Meeker decided his time, though, would be best suited to just full-on insulting everything the Utes stood for and believed. Nathan tried to force them into farming, but the Utes were getting along just fine as migratory hunter-gatherers. He also saw this as the perfect time to inform the Utes of the warm embrace of Jesus Christ, a man they did not have much need of or know anything about. Things came to a head when Nathan decided to plow a field to show them how neat and cool farming is, but he ended up plowing a field that they used for allowing their animals to graze and for horse racing.
Come on.
The Utes were pissed, and Nathan, being the whitest of all men, took great offense to their anger.
The more things change.
Oh, it's always the same. Especially because if the Utes were to continue being migratory, then it would make it all the harder to entrap them on a reservation forever. Nathan would fall into a heated argument with the leaders of the Utes, which ended in Nathan getting his ass kicked and scared off from his home. Instead of taking the fucking hint, Nathan wired the US government for military assistance. Meeker would return to his home, confident the military was on their way. But what was on the way, and much sooner than the US military, was a whole bunch of really angry Utes. On September 29, 1879, the Utes attacked the Indian Agency and killed all 10 agents, including Nathan Meeker. 18 miles away, the chief of the Utes, Colero, found the military forces that Nathan had requested and attacked them as well. In a matter of minutes, Colero had and his men killed 13 US soldiers, including everyone with the rank of captain or above. The Utes would keep the US military pinned down for nearly 2 weeks, retreating just before a force of 350 soldiers arrived. Congress would respond to Colorado's successful attack by passing the Ute Removal Act, which would force the White River and the Uncompahgre Utes out of Colorado entirely. The Uncompahgre Utes had nothing to do with any of Colorado's attacks and even acted as peace mediators in the short period afterwards. Both bands were forcibly relocated to the Uinta Ute Indian Reservation in eastern Utah, a patch of land that has so much less silver in it, and is also decidedly shittier.
Yeah, but probably by now has like lithium or like the new silver for the 21st century, essentially. I'm just saying.
That's a good marketing slogan for lithium, I guess. Now that the Utes had their land stolen, the silver mines of Aspen were at full force. Things really kicked into high gear with the passing of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act in 1890, which essentially ordered the U.S. government to buy a fuck ton more silver to back up the value of the U.S. dollar. You see, it used to be that the dollar wasn't just a piece of paper, but it was actually backed by gold and silver. So in theory, you could take a dollar, you could go to a bank and say, give me this much in gold or silver, and they would.
Now who sounds like a third-party candidate?
I know. God damn it. Bring back the silver standard.
Gold standard fidelity.
America will not die across gold. Man, that's a William James Bryan joke 3 people will get. That's how it used to be. For you. And nowadays, the dollar is backed up by sheer emotion. It's kind of unsettling when you realize that, but it's pretty much just out of hype and power.
It's only unsettling when you have a crazed narcissist in power. Otherwise, it totally is fine.
Yeah,
it works.
It's a good thing that hasn't happened yet.
All currency is essentially based on, like, is there truly any value in gold other than what we give it?
I mean, no.
Or did I just blow your mind?
Look, I don't appreciate the fact that you're going after the De Beers Corporation and jewelers like this. We've already lost enough sponsors, I'm sure. Your only hope, Casper, please save us.
I love sleeping.
That is the one thing all millennials love.
I'm so tired all the time.
Look, I just want to have a restful sleep. If you have a mattress that can keep my anxiety nightmares at bay, I will pay double.
Can you imagine what? Yeah, please give me the mattress company that has a thin film of opiate dust.
Oh my God,
that will just enter my skin as I sleep. Yeah. Oh my God, Dusty, did I just figure out how we're going to be millionaires?
It's terrible, but the first thing that popped in my mind was like, well, the refills on that opium duster is where we're going to make the money.
Yes, it's subscription-based.
Oh my God, this is essentially a SodaStream racket. Good to know we have something to fall back on if the podcast doesn't work. Just, everyone, don't steal our idea.
Yeah.
By listening to the podcast, you're legally bound to not steal our idea of an illegal bed.
I'm going to need you to copy and paste this statement onto your Facebook page ASAP.
Anyways, this sudden burst in silver buying would lead to Aspen's first major boom. 5,000 people would flock to the city, which in the coming year would become the nation's largest producer of silver. The city would build a multitude of gorgeous red brick buildings, which still exist today, and they're still absolutely stunning. And this would include hotels, banks, 2 theaters, and an opera house.
Ooh, oh yeah.
The city even had electric lighting by 1893. But just as quickly as things had gone good, everything swiftly went to fuck. In 1893, President Grover Cleveland would repeal the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. And it's the timeline on this is a little muddy, or at least from my research. I'm sure it's not very muddy to people who study this, but it seems what happened was something called the Panic of 1893, which involves Argentinian bank loans. I'm not much sure beyond that, but either which way, it led America into some very dangerous economic issues. And so, since the government didn't want to keep buying more silver, Grover Cleveland repealed it and said, we're done buying silver, which might have also worsened the Panic of 1893, which led to a Great Depression that lasted for almost 4 years.
So similarly, I don't know a lot of the specifics, but it is fascinating that in the 1890s, there was a lot of fast and loose playing with the stock market in a way that like just continued ramping up until 1929 when they finally put laws into effect to stop people from doing that. And what they did was they formed the SEC to start looking into all these like shady practices, and they had the patriarch of the Kennedy family, Joe Kennedy, head the SEC, because how do you catch a thief? By hiring a thief.
Oh my God.
Literally, they're like, well, Joe, you did this shit. You know how they're thinking. And he's like, yeah, I fucking do. This is how you make millions off of the backs of poor people. Done. You want a law about it? Fine. But like, here's how it goes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so frustrating to learn. So within weeks, most of the silver mines were completely closed in Aspen. Aspen would fall into a population slide that would see the city go from 5,000 people in 1890 to just barely over 700 in 1930. But lucky for Aspen, it was on the verge of its second boom. Following World War II, an Army veteran named Friedel Pfeiffer moved to the town with one goal in mind: turn Aspen into a hotspot for skiing.
Hell yeah.
Friedel would partner with Chicago-based businessman Walter Pepke, who made his fortune in corrugated boxes, and his philanthropist wife, Elizabeth, to found the Aspen Skiing Company in 1946. At the time, the company featured the world's longest ski lift, and I don't know much about skiing, but I assume it had, really good angles. And the snow was, what's a good quality of snow if you're skiing? Do you know anything about skiing?
A little bit.
Okay.
Little. So yeah, you want that pow. You want that good powder.
Damn it. So in 1946, Friedel and the Pepkes founded the Aspen Skiing Company, and by 1950, the company would host the World Alpine Championships, the first time anyone in America had ever hosted it. So this is kind of like Europe's chance to be like, oh, I suppose America can have this now.
Yes, this was like that great moment in the 70s when California became like a winter.
Absolutely. That was weirdly the same comparison I was thinking. That's amazing.
Yes! Because we're wine snobs.
I mean, we're wine drinkers. We're picky wine drinkers. I don't quite think we're snobs. We're not on here talking about, it's pronounced Gewürztraminer. Oh, are you having a Cabernet with chili? How gauche.
Oh my God.
Which, heads up to everyone, don't do that. It will hurt. Anyway, what are we talking about? Skiing.
Skiing.
While the town began to take off as a ski villa, Walter and Elizabeth got to work turning this once dying mining town into a hub of fucking culture and goddamn class. Their first move was to found the Aspen Institute. What does the Aspen Institute do, you might ask? Well, from their website, its mission is to foster leadership based on enduring values and to provide a nonpartisan venue for dealing with critical issues.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wanking motion all day, every day.
That sounds like radical centrism to me. Worst kind of centrism.
No, so when was this? When were Elizabeth and what's his face establishing this?
The 1950s, 1949, 1950.
I will give it to them for inventing the TED Talk.
Yeah, pretty much.
They were way ahead of it.
So I'm going to make it even worse. So the inaugural event was a celebration of Goethe's 200th birthday.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it's one of those things that when I read that, it's like, imagine that you've been living in Aspen, at least you were living there in the hard times in like the 20s and 30s. And not 10 years later, like a handful of literary celebrities have showed up, including I think Thornton Wilder and a few other folks. And they're all there to celebrate the 200th birthday of some dude named Goethe. It would be a really confusing time.
Right. Yeah. And also just this weird moment as like a hard scrabbling miner thinking, is this gentrification?
Just like coming out with like silver lung from the mine, just being like, someone ought to make a fucking word for this. It's like rich people and they're taking shit.
They keep calling my outfit cute.
Oh God. Yeah, and so this became the turning point of Aspen, Colorado. The same year, the Pepkes created the Aspen Music Festival, a rockin' fortnight of nothing but classical music. Which I will give them this, in 1965 they did have Duke Ellington, which credits due. The rest of it sounds like a boring fucking time, especially 2 years after Goethe's birthday party, and you're crawling out of the silver mines, and all of a sudden you're hearing like Bach and Mozart. You're like, I don't know if this is my town anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds great, but what the hell?
What happened to the dirty ditties that really sing each other?
Within 2 years, they expanded the festival into a school for classical training. The very first year brought in 183 students. Within a decade, Aspen had begun to change. 3 more skiing resorts would open up between 1950 and 1967, and the wealthy began to take notice of this tiny little town, some even going as far as to move to this hip new locale. But the rich weren't the only people with Aspen on the radar. It turns out the group archetype of the late 60s had begun to make a trek to this beautiful slice of nature. That's right, Aspen was being invaded by hippies.
Yes. Gentrify the gentrifiers.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. We bring tidings of a word for this shit, man. What is it, though, that made Aspen such a beacon for the hippies? Well, our first answer to that would be answered by the initial hero of this story, a bike rider and attorney by the name of Joe Edwards. Joe had been raised in Texas and would double major in engineering and pre-law at the University of Houston in 1965. The next year, he'd officially get his law degree. Despite having a brand new degree, Joe would instead get a job working in engineering instead of practicing law. He would end up marrying his high school sweetheart as well. At some point, Joe would go on a summer camping trip to Aspen, and while there, he noted seeing 2 women hanging out in a Jeep with their dogs, having an amazing time. Joe remembers them both laughing as they drove off, and he thought to himself that in Aspen, quote, people just looked like they were having a hell of a good time. Joe would return to Houston just in time for his entire life to fall apart. Turns out his wife had been sleeping with the next door neighbor and left him.
Scandal!
It's not nice. Joe recollected how at home he had felt in Aspen, took a leave of absence from his engineering job, and drove to the last place that he had felt happiness. He would take a job flipping burgers at a ski resort and use his money to learn how to ski. Joe said, quote, I was taking skiing lessons and learning to ski, and I just never went home. I called my roommates and said, sell my furniture. And they said, we already have. You were behind on rent.
and how old is Joe at this point?
At this time, I think he is 28, 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This is like the perfect age to be doing this.
Yes. Because you hear someone who's like married and then wife is cheating on him and he just like fucks off to Aspen to flip burgers. And it's like, I'm pretty, like, isn't that the American, whatever, that, oh God,
like
that
crisis?
Yeah. I was like, no, he's just 28, 29. Cool.
Yeah, so this is like, this is not a creepy origin story. Joe remembers Aspen as being without any form of class structure during those days. But within a couple of years, that image would begin to break. You see, the old guard of Aspen were not particularly keen on this new batch of young weirdos showing up. And the least jazzed about this would be town magistrate Guido Meyer. Guido had grown up in Switzerland, and after World War II, he immigrated to New York City before making Aspen his lifelong home. In 1952, he opened Guido's Swiss Inn, a restaurant serving authentic Swiss cuisine, and followed that up by opening the Crest House Lodge, as well as a ski and gift shop. The kind of interesting thing about Guido's life, too, is both of those businesses he he didn't really luck into them because there were some really shitty situations. Like for the Swiss Inn, he bought a plot of land sight unseen, and when he got there, he found out the building was complete dog shit. But he paid $3,000 for it, which I guess in the 50s is like $80 billion or something.
Yeah, checks out.
And then the Crest House Lodge, he went into business with a business partner, and the business partner fucked off after a year. And so he was just kind of forced to keep it going.
Oh.
Guido's businesses would become standards for the town, but one little detail of the Swiss Inn would stick out. A red and white hand-carved wooden sign that simply said, no hippies allowed. Guido's son would note that his father would keep a baseball bat behind the bar and that he, on a number of occasions, wielded it whenever a hippie would dare enter his restaurant and refuse to leave.
Amazing.
So when Guido became town magistrate in the 60s, of course he decided that his newfound position was the perfect place to make those long-haired, dope-fiend communists fucking pay. And the Aspen City Council agreed. You got a long hair standing on the sidewalk? Well, that's a ticket for blocking the sidewalk. Are there a bunch of you from out of town that no one knows just standing around a park? Well, that's undesired transience and vagrancy. On one day, a 15-year-old hitchhiker was arrested by Guido and was sentenced to 90 days in the county jail and a $200 fine.
Oh my God.
And shittily enough, 90 days in the county jail and $200 was pretty much the penalty that all hippies got for whatever crime Guido thought they committed. According to an article we'll talk about later, the more liberal-minded folks of the town convened a meeting for the ACLU to try to get Guido to cease, but their actions didn't go much further than just making the meeting and then congratulating each other. Things were looking bleak. That is until Joe Edwards stepped up and put his law degree to use. At this time, Joe was 28, and he'd never been to court. But he stepped up and filed a civil rights lawsuit against Guido Meyer in the city of Aspen. The city had sent a whole team of lawyers to face off against Joe and his hippie clients, and all Joe was hoping was to get a preliminary injunction to end the random arresting of anyone deemed too hippie for Aspen. By all rights, it should have been an incredibly daunting moment for Joe, but he went into the court with one perfect plan. When Guido Meyer was on the stand, Joe referenced an interview in the Aspen Times where Guido stated that he wanted to run all the hippies out of town, and Joe asked him if he still believed that. Quote, Guido Meyer, he was true to his form. I asked him this question, he just went off. Those dirty hippies, they're all over the place and they're filthy and they haven't washed and they smoke dope. The judge responded to this by immediately fighting for Joe Edwards and his clients. However, after the case was filed, the cops had stopped arresting hippies, so technically the injunction couldn't be given. However, the judge gave Joe his phone number and insisted that if Guido started back up again, that he should call the judge immediately and an injunction would be put in place.
This is amazing. First of all, this is white on white crime. That's what's happening right here. Secondly, this needs to be taught everywhere so that later when kids move from the suburbs to Chicago and you start hearing about the cops mistreating people of color, you can be like, well, remember when in Aspen there was some guy who just really hated hippies and then all of the hippies were rounded up and put into jails for 90 days just for like hanging out in a park? That's what this is. It's just as bullshit.
Yep. This would become known as the hippie trials.
The hippie trials.
Which is weird because there was only one case, so I don't know why it's trials. But I don't question the research, it's just there. It was a huge win, but it came at a price. Joe would say, my father, who was a lawyer too, told me not to take this case because the business community would hate me, which is exactly what happened. By that point, Joe had caught the eye of someone far more powerful than a local chamber of commerce. At some time between 2 and 3 in the morning, Joe got a call. The voice on the other end was mumbling, but very clear that he wanted Joe to run for mayor of Aspen that year, under a banner of, quote, freak power. It would take another meeting over beers at the Jerome Hotel before Joe would say, fuck it, why not? But Joe would become an independent candidate for mayor, and that voice would become his de facto campaign manager, which is a very weird fucking job for the likes of Hunter S. Thompson.
What?
Yep.
What?
Yep. That's right. We introduced character number 2, gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh my God!
So there are whole books and movies and podcasts that cover the life of Hunter S. Thompson. So I'm just going to keep it short and state that for those of you who don't know, he's one of the best fucking journalists of the 20th century. He's most known for creating gonzo journalism, which is a form of journalism that, while most journalists try to keep themselves out of the story to remain unbiased, or to at least the appearance of without bias, Hunter was the complete opposite. He made himself the center of the story to be able to put his emotions into what he was feeling, to be able to put like his random thoughts and ideas interspersed into whatever piece he was working on, and he did not hide his bias.
Yeah, no, he's best known for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, obviously. Absolutely. But it is worth finding his work on the Derby.
Yeah, that article is actually the very first one in which he used gonzo journalism.
No shit.
Yeah. It was published in Scanlan's Monthly, and it's entitled The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved.
Yes, and I think it comes illustrated by Ralph Steadman, who's one of my favorites.
That was the first time they did it together.
So good.
Yeah, if you've ever bought a beer from Flying Dog Brewery, they're the ones who Raging Bitch and all of that. Ralph Steadman's the guy who drew for all of them and did all their designs. So as much as a mad luminary as Hunter is, it is still important to note that at this time, Hunter was still years out from becoming nationally well-known. In 1966, he just released his first book, Hell's Angels, a work of nonfiction detailing a year he spent riding with the notorious biker gang. He would leave after they beat the complete shit out of him, furious after realizing he might make money off of a book he was writing about them. Thanks in part to the film adaptation of Fear and Loathing, Hunter is viewed as a bit of a drug-fueled lunatic, and that his writing must be the same. But, I mean, yeah, the dude loves drugs. He doesn't hide that whatsoever. But his writing is a lot more of his struggle with the wasted potential of the movements of his era. While living in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood of San Francisco, then known as the capital of the hippies, Hunter would write, "The thrust is no longer for change or progress or revolution, but merely to escape, to live on the far perimeter of a world that might have been, perhaps should have been, and strike a bargain for survival on purely personal terms." Thanks to the success of Hell's Angels, Hunter was able to afford to move back to Woody Creek, Colorado, by his infamous fortified compound, quote-unquote, Owl Farm. Woody Creek is about a 15-minute drive outside of Aspen. Now, a lot of the following is going to come from an article Hunter wrote for Rolling Stone called Freak Power in the Rockies, or, get a snack because this is going to take a bit, a memoir of rambling discussion, parentheses, with rude slogans, end parentheses, of freak power in the Rockies, on the weird mechanics of running a takeover bid on a small town, and a vulgar argument for seizing political power and using it like a gun ripped away from a cop, with jangled comments on the uncertain role of the head and the awful stupor factor, and other disorganized notes on how to punish the fatbacks, how to make sure that today's pig is tomorrow's offal, and why this crazed new world can only be dealt with by a new posse.
You know those, like, pre-Renaissance essays that were written in Latin?
Every book before 1800?
Yeah, where it's like, on the thoughts of, and it's in Latin, so it's like, or German, and it's like, duh or ow or whatever, but it goes on for a chapter before you even get to the essay itself. That's his style.
Yeah. So it is biased, but it's also the best source of information from the side of the Edwards campaign, and it is an astounding indictment of what Joe Edwards and Hunter Thompson were really out to fight against in this election. As you named it, gentrification.
Nailed it.
You see, now that the Pepkes and the ski barons were getting their rich friends to notice Aspen, their wealthy cohort were now wanting to move there. Not full-time, mind you, but it would be such a wonderful place to have a second or third home, or to invest. Or as Hunter would say of his former neighborhood of Haight-Ashbury, what happened in the Haight echoed earlier scenes in North Beach in the Village, and it proved once again the basic futility of seizing turf you can't control. The pattern never varies. A low-rent area suddenly blooms new and loose and human, and then fashionable, which attracts the press and the cops at about the same time. Cop problems attract more publicity, which then attracts fad salesmen and hustlers, which means money, and that attracts junkies and jackrollers. Their bad action causes publicity and, for some perverse reason, an influx of bored, upward mobile types who dig the menace of, quote, white ghetto life, and whose expense account tastes drive local rents and street prices out of reach of the original settlers, who are forced, once again, to move on.
I mean, Soho, New York, meatpacking district. Yeah.
Park, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Hunter would note that one of the most hopeful developments of the failed Haight-Ashbury scene was the exodus to rural communities, which kept a whole generation of heads believing that the future lay somewhere outside the cities. This is precisely what led to the sudden influx of freaks and heads to the quiet town of Aspen. And heads is kind of shorthand for potheads and, like, drug users. Most would come in 1967 for the summer weather, but a few hundred stayed throughout the winter and took jobs as, quote, carpenters, waiters, bartenders, and dishwashers. By mid-69, they occupied most of Aspen's so-called low-cost housing, which mostly meant trailer parks. Side story. At one point, Hunter notes that the largest of the low-cost trailer parks is owned by New York City art dealer Armand Bartos, whose collection today is worth an estimated $781 million. His tenants would tell Hunter that their rent always seemed to go up, quote, every time he decides to buy another pop art original.
This is so surreal.
Yeah. One of them even makes a statement where it's just like, we give this asshole our money, and then he gives that money to some shithead like Warhol. Which made me smile, because I do not like Andy Warhol. So take that, Warhol, I guess. It didn't help that Hunter had also heard a rumor that out-of-state and local elite had already picked out the next mayor of Aspen, as well as the sacrificial land candidate that would run against him for show, allowing them to extend their power, sell off their land to developers, and continue to force the uncouth and poor out of their new playground. The first 2 weeks of their campaign were, quote, absolutely useless, as they watched folks they thought they could easily rely on just completely flank out. But Thompson and Edwards just kept on. They would hold campaign meetings and strategy meetings in public at the Jerome Hotel, and weirdly enough, people began to show up to help. It started with volunteer help, then random donations from strangers, to the biggest coup of the campaign, getting an unlimited credit line to the local radio station, where the campaign ads that they ran, quote, caused people to foam at the mouth and chase their tails in impotent rage. Rage, however, doesn't win votes, but the campaign already knew they were never going to sway over the more conservative folks. They really only had 2 options. The first, get the freaks, heads, and hippies registered to vote and get them out on election day. Now, there's a lot of talk as to why people don't vote, and apathy tends to be the reason that other people bring up. However, no one really ever talks about why people are apathetic in the first place. Often it's just assumed that people are lazy and they can't be bothered to vote. But Hunter has a really wonderful breakdown on at least one of the big reasons why people, at least in Aspen, wouldn't vote. But first we have to bring up a dude by the name of Bugsy Barnard, the outgoing mayor of Aspen.
Oh my God, his name was Bugsy.
His nickname was Bugsy, but he loved going by it.
What is this place?
Well, the dude looks like a starched shirt that grew a crew cut. Bugsy was a bit wilder than his look would suggest. Hunter speaks somewhat positively of the man, stating that he usually wielded his power as mayor in a decent way, and made note that Bugsy's friends varied from, quote, dope dealers to outlaw bikers to district judges and horse traders. Even me. Hunter's friendship with Bugsy led him to believe that the soon-to-be former mayor would be nothing but helpful in Joe's campaign. As Hunter posited, it seemed entirely logical that an old freak would want to pass the torch to a young freak. And rather than helping Edwards, he tried to destroy him. This would escalate to Bugsy cutting radio ads that ran 2 days before Election Day, threatening Edwards' supporters that if they showed up to vote, that they would be risking long prison terms for vote fraud.
Ooh, that sounds very much like present day.
Yeah. Hunter would write, most of the freaks felt that voting wasn't worth the kind of bullshit that went with it, and the mayor's illegal threats only reinforced their notion that politics in America was something to be avoided. Getting busted for grass was one thing because the crime was worth the risk, but they saw no sense in going to court for a, quote, political technicality, even if they weren't guilty.
Oh my God. What the mayor is doing is illegal, and I'm just so... My heart hurts that they're just like, yeah, if I'm busted for pot, man, that's like pot. That matters.
Yeah,
it's like, no, that is
high. Yeah.
Rather than your constitutional duty as an American, it's a democracy. You fools.
But it's also the idea of like what has the government constantly been when I have been alive? It's been authoritarian. It's been forcing us into wars that have been causing genocide. It has been doing nothing terrible, and we just spent many years trying to change it only for things to stay the same. So why the fuck? I would move to the mountains and do fucking nothing in politics. I know neither of us agree.
I know, no,
but I understand where it's coming from. And I think that's something that people need to understand more. It's kind of why Trump was so successful, is he was able to, bring out a lot of people who had never voted before, but for kind of the exact opposite feeling reasons. Just like the government keeps getting more and more liberal and it's never going to change it. Fuck it. And
then the flip side of that are like people of color voters who look at both candidates and are like, what does it matter? Yeah. What does it matter?
Yeah.
Like I know I should.
Nihilism's a hell of a word.
Oof.
Yeah. So the other option they had was to court the liberals of the town. I mean, court's the wrong term. Dupe the local liberals. Hunter makes a point to note that the Edwards platform was catered entirely to woo local liberals, but was vague enough that they could keep some of the more radical plans under wraps. One of which would be jackhammering all of the streets in town and sodding them over, so no one could drive in Aspen.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
At first,
this town is crazy.
Oh, Aspen is wild as fuck. Like 60s Aspen, fucking insane. Kind of sounds great. At first, the plan worked. Joe was able to build a delegation of local liberals to his side. But the more the campaign went on, the more they began to notice that the support was just lip service. You see, one of the biggest goals of the campaign was to make Aspen completely unmarketable to land developers and keep the natural environment of the town clean and unharmed. Many local ranchers would state that this was their goal as well. But when discussing policy with Joe, it would become pretty clear that they didn't give a fuck about the environment, so long as they could sell their land for huge buckets of cash and get the fuck out.
Developers gonna be developers.
Yeah. Hunter wrote, quote, "We were not surprised when many of them made a point of withdrawing their support about halfway through Edwards' campaign. At first they had liked our words and our fiery underdog stance, parentheses, fighting the good fight in another hopeless cause, etc. But when Edwards began looking like a winner, our liberal allies panicked. Leading up to Election Day, there had been one major victory. The mayor's favorite candidate to win had dropped out of the race. It's some guy named Gates. I couldn't find his first name. So Grant Gates is his name.
Yes. So Grant Gates.
Yeah. The one that the local elites were like, you're our new mayor. Win at our leisure. Joe Edwards was gaining traction and quite a ton of support. The fear had gotten so great that the local Democrats and Republicans realized that if they both stayed in the race, that this dirt-biking hippie lawyer might just win. So the Democrat favorite quit, leaving it a two-way race between Joe and local businesswoman Eve Homeyer. Now, Eve had moved to Aspen in 1959 following the death of her husband. She had attended Mount Holyoke and had majored in astronomy, and when she got to Aspen, she alternated between being a, quote, ski bum and running the House of Ireland, one of those shops that sells huge sweaters and a selection of mugs with 3 Gaelic sayings on them, and probably pewter shamrocks.
Yes! Oh, she's living my life.
I think all of us at one point dream of owning a company that every time someone walks by, they're like, is that a front? How much money do you need to launder? Now, Hunter didn't have much nice to say about Eve, comparing her to a cut-rate Mamie Eisenhower. And yes, she was a business-friendly Republican. But much of her campaign was born from the same worries as Joe Edwards. She hated that the city wasn't investing in creating open spaces. She loved the fuck out of public transit and wanted even more. And she even promised that if she won, she would never buy or drive a car.
Oh, I want to vote for her. And then buy a really, really itchy wool sweater for her store.
I can't wear it in the winter because it itches so much, and I can't wear it in the summer because it will kill me.
My skin is so irritated. It's a lovely cardigan, though.
Can you only wear this if you were a shirtless coal miner outside of Dublin? Like, My back has calluses. The sweater is perfect.
I am bright red from the loofah experience.
Thanks a lot, Homeland. You've done well for us. So the race had suddenly become a duel between a hippie lawyer and a sweet old lady. The day of the election, the Edwards campaign had two goals: get their people out of the House and in to vote, and to make sure that Bugsy Barnard didn't get away with any voter intimidation. While folks started calling, Hunter and a pair of poll watchers from Joe's campaign made their way to the Ward 1 polling station where Bugsy was set to arrive. Oh, and the Ward 1 voting station also happened to be the Crest House, Guido Meyer's hotel.
Guido's back!
So I also really want to note that Hunter refers to Guido as a Nazi repeatedly. I don't know if this is true, but Hunter does kind of make a point that after World War II, America suddenly became flooded with a lot of Swiss and Austrian ski instructors.
Oh my god.
It's an interesting point to make, but I highly doubt that he was. Who fucking knows? All I know is Hunter didn't get sued for saying it, so.
And Switzerland was notoriously neutral.
Yep. I mean, look, the Von Trapps left for a reason.
They left, yeah. They boot scooted out.
Anyway, I think Thompson says best what happened. So I'm going to be quoting a pretty long paragraph here from the article. Hopefully this doesn't fall into plagiarism, but it's honest to God, it's the best. The entire thing is just the best summary of what happened. So get a Rolling Stone subscription for a month. So Guido was watching eagerly when the mayor arrived in his parking lot at 10 minutes to 7, creeping his Porsche through a gauntlet of silent Edwards people. We had mustered a half dozen of the scurviest-looking legal voters we could find, and when the mayor arrived at the polls, these freaks were waiting to vote. Behind them, lounging around a coffee dispenser in an old Volkswagen van, were at least a dozen others, most of them large and bearded, and several so eager for violence that they had spent the whole night making chain whips and loading up on speed just to stay crazy. Bugsy looked horrified. It was the first time in his long drug experience that he had ever laid eyes on a group of non-passive, super aggressive heads. What had gotten into them? Why were their eyes so wild? And why were they yelling, "You're fucked, Bugsy! We're gonna croak you! Your whole act is doomed! We're gonna beat your ass like a gong!" Who were they? All strangers? Some gang of ugly bikers or speed freaks from San Francisco? Yes, of course. That bastard Edwards had brought in a bunch of ringers. But then he looked again and recognized that at the head of the group, his ex-drink-along bar buddy, Brad Reed. The Potter was a known gun freak, 6'4" and 220 pounds, grinning down through his beard and a black hair flag, saying nothing, just smiling. Great God, he knew the others too. There was Don Davidson, the accountant, smooth-shaven and quite normal-looking in a sleek maroon ski parka, but not smiling at all. And who were those girls, those bright blonde bodies whose names he knew from a chance meetings in friendlier times? What were they doing out here at dawn, in the midst of this menacing mob? What indeed? He scurried inside to meet Guido, but instead ran into Tom Benton, the hairy artist and known radical. Benton was grinning like a crocodile and waving a small black microphone saying, "Welcome, Bugsy. You're late. The voters are waiting outside. Yes, did you see them out there? Were they friendly? And if you wonder what I'm doing here, I'm Joe Edwards' poll watcher. And the reason I have this little black machine here is that I want to tape every word you say when you start committing felonies by harassing our voters." The mayor lost his first confrontation almost instantly. One of the first obvious Edwards voters of the day was a blonde kid who looked about 17. Bugsy began to jabber at him, and Benton moved in with the microphone ready to intervene. But before Benton could utter a word, the kid began snarling at the mayor, yelling, "Go fuck yourself, Bugsy. You figure out how old I am. I know the goddamn law. I don't have to show you proof of anything. You're a dying man, Bugsy. Get out of my way. I'm ready to vote."
Yes!
I would give anything to go to a polling station where that was going down. This happened a couple more times before Bugsy and Guido realized any voter intimidation that might have been planned was fucked from the start. Before 9 a.m., the biggest obstacle of the Edwards campaign had been vanquished. The campaign spent the rest of the time calling supporters and demanding they, quote, "get their asses out of bed to vote." About 2 hours before the polls closed, they realized they didn't even have a campaign headquarters for after the votes came in. A campaign member volunteered her boss's office in the hotel, and everyone hurried there. It took a bit of pleasure of having to push through the opposition party's ballroom festivities to get to their new offices.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's chef's kiss right there.
Yeah. A kind of funny side thing, too, is apparently the people who were there for the festivities would later demand that the owner of the office they took over be evicted from the hotel. I don't think they won that, but it was just like a real petty moment.
So petty.
So Hunter states that he was pessimistic throughout most of the campaign, but by election night, the electricity was so high that even he was beginning to think that Joe might win. And worse than that, he'd promised Joe that if Joe won, that he himself would run for sheriff next year. Hunter, who had been up for 50 hours straight at that point, went home before the final ballots had come in, with as what he referred to as 22 various pills stuffed into his parka.
Classic.
In the end, Joe Edwards would lose by 6 votes.
Ah!
Now, some would claim that absentee ballots that hadn't come in on time would have led to Joe's winning, but Hunter notes that there were only 5 of those that had come in late, so Joe would have actually only lost by 1 vote if those had been. But this was the moment that kicked all that pessimism aside. Hunter felt that for once, the freak vote actually had a real shot at winning. So despite Joe barely losing, Hunter amended his promise and entered the 1970 race for county sheriff.
Aww.
Hunter would run as an independent, and initially would be facing off against a Democrat and a Republican. Once again, both parties realized that this could lead to a freak sheriff. So in a bit of a backroom dealing, the Democrat for sheriff agreed to drop out in exchange for the Republican candidate for county commissioner agreeing to drop out as well.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is shady AF.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on them.
Yeah, this is why I'm such an advocate for third parties in not 2020 election years, because this is the kind of bullshit that happens is you have the 2 parties that are very in love with their power. They may disagree on a lot of things, but they both agree that they love being the only 2 people in power. So this meant that Hunter's only candidate would be another crew-cut white man incumbent named Carroll D. Whitmire. Carroll had a reputation for being painfully old school. He insisted his deputies wear cowboy hats and appear as Western as possible. He also at most had a 9th grade education. One former deputy said that he ran the department like a family-owned business, which is a quaint way of saying that everyone was on call 24/7, and if you claimed overtime, that would be expressly forbidden, and you shouldn't do it, even if you've worked overtime.
Oh boy.
So one of Hunter's first moves was to shave his own head. This allowed him to constantly refer to Whitmire as, quote, my long-haired opponent.
Such a dick.
Mm-hmm. So the end of Hunter's Freak Power article would come out during the sheriff's race and included his entire platform. So we're going to go through all 6 points. 1, sod the streets at once. Create a huge parking lot and auto storage lot on the outskirts of town, preferably somewhere out of sight. All public movement would be by foot, and a fleet of bicycles maintained by the city police force.
I love this.
2, change the name of Aspen to Fat City. The reasoning behind this is people in marketing had discovered that if you put Aspen in front of something, it's going to sell better because it has like this wealthy feeling to it.
Yeah.
And so if suddenly the name of the city's Fat City, it's going to make marketers of the time be like, well, we can't call it like Fat City Skiing or anything like that. And it's going to scare away anyone who's like, oh, this lovely little town in Colorado that all your wealthy friends should move to. It's called Fat City.
I'm on board, but he has to spell it with a PH.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was the 90s, he might have done that. I don't know. 3, drug sales must be controlled. One of his first things he would do is build a set of stocks in order to punish dishonest dope dealers in a proper public fashion. No drug worth taking should be sold for money. Nonprofit sales, though, will be viewed as borderline cases and judged on their merits.
That just sounds like a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, just fucking give away your drugs.
Yeah.
This next one is actually probably my favorite. 4, well, second favorite. They're all great. 4, hunting and fishing should be forbidden to all non-residents, with the exception of those who can obtain the signed endorsement of a resident who will then be legally responsible for anything you do illegally.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this would be the way to keep out all like the sport hunters and the people who like, oh, I shot like 6 buffalo, let them rot in the field, I guess. I took my picture.
Yeah.
5, the sheriff and his deputies should never be armed in public. Every urban riot, shootout, and bloodbath involving guns in recent memory has been set off by some trigger-happy cop in a fear frenzy. And no cop in Aspen has had to use a gun for so many years that I feel safe in offering a $12 cash award to anybody who can recall such an incident in writing.
God, where's the lie? I love this.
It's probably one of my favorite sentences. And 6, the main purpose of the sheriff's office will be to harass all those engaged in any form of land rape.
Yes.
Yeah. Thoughts, opinions on these wonderful 6 things?
It's honestly, it's unfortunate how prescient it is that it like, wow, again, nothing's changed. This is absolutely what the sheriff of certainly Fat City, Colorado should be doing.
Yeah. I love all of it. I mean, Fat City is a little problematic now, but I get what he's going for.
You're not wrong. But if it's a PH.
Yeah. Or if he names it to like, Shitburg.
Shitburg is way better than Fat City.
Yeah. So yeah, during the Edwards campaign, Thompson noted that people would question kind of out loud, just like, oh, what if we just started 1 week sooner? Positing that if they had just gotten started a little bit more ahead, that they might have gotten those extra 7 votes to win. Or 2, depending on absentee votes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which Hunter brushes away. He said it was the best of luck that things came together the way they did on election day. A week later or earlier and things might have changed entirely. It just was what it was, and that day was enough to at least shake Aspen into realizing that the hippies, heads, and freaks were now part of the town too.
Yeah.
That kind of luck didn't fall for Hunter, though.
Oh.
It's hard to find an accurate amount that Thompson lost by, but it was definitely by more than 6 votes. Thompson would opine afterwards that if the freak vote can't win in Aspen, then it can't win anywhere. Hunter also noted that he lost probably because of his Rolling Stone article, causing more fear amongst the city than actually galvanizing the people who lived there.
Damn it. Well, yeah, he was meant to be a journalist anyway.
Yeah. Hunter would leave politics entirely and return to a life of amazing journalism. But here's where Hunter was wrong. Because in 1972, Joe Edwards would run for county commissioner. And he'd win.
Hey!
He would develop bike trails, invest in open spaces, and lead the charge against overdevelopment of Aspen. During the 70s, the radicals that had moved to the county had actually taken control of the local government and used it to keep Aspen pristine for about a decade. And I really wish I could end there.
No.
I mean, it's not all bad.
Why can't you, Dusty? Why can't you just end there?
Time's a flat circle, I'm so sorry.
No.
Like I said, it's not all bad. Eve Homeyer ended up being a really solid mayor, and in time actually became more liberal. She was noted for having a very open mind to things, and if she disagreed with you, she would hear you out. And if you made an argument that, was solid, she'd probably change her mind. Joe Edwards even praised her 2 terms as mayor, calling her a good mayor.
Jesus Christ.
Not great, but good. She would keep her promise to never drive or buy a car, and would go in to serve on the local public transportation board. I was reading through a Facebook page dedicated to her because she passed about within the past decade. And someone was saying that she would always come into, every once in a while she would come into mayoral meetings or county board meetings and stuff just to sit in and hear how things were going. But it was kind of a thing where no, she's a de facto member. If she has something she wants to say, we're going to listen, we're going to hear her out because her opinion is respected amongst everyone. And another person said anytime that someone drove to a meeting, she would always look at you in a way that made you feel just completely guilty for doing it.
Yes, Eve!
Yeah, Eve Homeyer, kind of freaking wonderful. And a very funny thing, apparently there's an Aspen City Hall of Fame, and Joe Edwards and Eve Homeyer are both members of that Hall of Fame.
Aww.
Carol Whitmire would serve another term as county sheriff, but would be ousted via a district attorney investigation, finding that he had conducted various forms of mismanagement, sloppiness, and, quote, lack of leadership. So the thing with Carol Whitmire is when he was initially running for sheriff, he was convinced to do so by a fellow by the name of Harley Baldwin. Now, Harley Baldwin is, as Thompson would refer to him, of all the dirt pimps I've ever known, Harley Baldwin is the worst.
God damn.
Pretty much everything that Aspen is now is because of Harley Baldwin.
Go on.
So Harley was the one who convinced Carol Whitmire to run for sheriff. Harley's the one who in the 80s, when all of the radicals started falling out of style, he was the one who created all of the super fashionable things in Aspen. One such thing such as the Caribou Club, which was a private club under one of the hotels. He was the first person to bring in Dior, and then he brought in Gucci, and then he brought in Tod's, and Fred and Fendi, and Brioni.
No.
He's currently referred to, or when he was alive, as the King of Aspen. And he's the reason that Aspen now is the second and third home for so many wealthy people.
Got it.
It's currently one of the most expensive places to live. They do offer low-income housing, but they're still in trailer parks that are jokingly referred to as, quote, employee housing.
No.
And even those homes can go for as much as $900,000. I went on a Zillow just for a bit of fun. The cheapest house in Aspen I could find was about $400,000, but that one was outside of Aspen in the woods. And the most expensive one I could find was $54 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's been on the market for a long time, so they may be asking a little much. But then again, weed's now legal in Colorado, and we're at least talking about disarming the police. So just maybe, tearing up the streets of Aspen will be next. And that's the Battle of Aspen.
Oh my God.
So many people referred to it, the time Hunter S. Thompson ran for sheriff.
Both work. This was delightful.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I definitely started looking up ski resort deals, mostly because it's just humorous to think of going anywhere in these uncertain times.
Yeah.
But this is so great.
Oh, I promised you an architect.
Yeah, where's my goddamn architect?
Yeah. Hepke hired Bauhaus architect Walter Gropius to develop a municipal plan for Aspen.
Oh my god.
The music tent was designed by architect Eero Saarinen for the Aspen Music Festival.
They got Saarinen?
Yeah. Anyway, so those will be the architect ones I gave you. But yeah, there was this one architect who had designed a wing of the, I want to say, the Israeli Contemporary Art Museum, who's like another like landowner of the trailer parks and is just making fucking bank just being a landlord. Yep.
The American dream is dead to us, Dusty.
Yep, come to Aspen, where the beautiful nature is no one's to own, unless you're rich.
Yep. Also, I think, isn't Steve Martin from Aspen?
He was born in Waco.
Okay, so maybe you just lived there for a bit.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So yeah, so that's the story of a
Aspen.
sleepy little silver mining town.
Uh,
I feel bad for anyone who still lives there, because Lord knows your property taxes are impossible.
how? That's the other thing, is that like you had, it was just so weird, like thinking of these high school dropouts and runaway kids who couldn't make it all the way to the height, ending up in Aspen and essentially being treated the same way people treat people coming from like Central America. It's like, yeah, but you need this, but you need baristas, you need waiters, you need like this working class base in any town. So stop harassing them.
Well, and that, like, the thing that, I mean, a lot of things in this really pissed me off, but referring to low-income housing as employee housing, just like, I nearly threw my computer when I read that. It's just like, fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you and your Down Abbey manse.
Man. So yeah, so thanks for joining us, y'all, on this extra long episode of Gadfly. So yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Vote Rocky next year. Not this year.
No.
Next year.
Or never. It's fine.
Gadfly is a production of Added Serotonin. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at gadflypod.